The sun was high in the sky, burning everything below. The air was dry, making people feel thirsty. Across from a big mansion, an old woman sat under a small tree, watching the black iron gates as if waiting for someone. Her clothes were old, her wrapper tied tight around her thin waist. Her face had many wrinkles, her hands rough from age. She had been sitting there for hours, just as she had done every day for the past 3 years. No one knew where she came from, and no one asked anymore. She was just there, part of the street, like the beggars at the market or the people selling nuts by the road. The guards at the gate had seen her so many times, they no longer paid attention to her. At first, they tried to chase her away. They yelled at her, poured water on her, even said they would call the police. But she never fought back. She just picked up her small bag, moved a few steps away, and sat down again. Over time, they grew tired. She was not hurting anyone, and she never asked for food or money. She just sat there, waiting. A young maid, Amara, stepped out of the gate with a small bag of trash. As she walked to the bin, she looked at the old woman and sighed. It was hard not to feel sorry for her. She looked so weak, so tired, yet she never left. "Mama, why do you sit here every day?" Amara asked. The old woman looked up slowly. Her eyes were dull, but held something deep, something sad. "I am waiting," she simply said. Amara frowned. Waiting for who? The old woman smiled, but said nothing. She only looked back at the gate. Amara sighed and shook her head. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small loaf of bread. "Here, Mama, eat something." She placed the bread beside the woman and hurried back inside before the headmaid caught her talking to a stranger. Inside the mansion, life went on as usual. The yard was large, with pretty flowers and neat grass. Fancy cars lined the driveway, and the house itself was the kind only seen in magazines. It belonged to Chief Oluwaseun Adeyemi, a very rich businessman, feared and respected by many. At that time, Chief Adeyemi was in his 30s, looking through some business papers. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and sharp eyes. Everything about him showed power. He had worked hard for his success and had no time for distractions. "Sir, the board meeting is set for 3 o'clock, his assistant, Mr. Dio, told him. Adeyemi nodded without looking up. "Make sure everything is ready. I don't want any mistakes." "Yes, sir." Just then, the head guard Hakim came into the office and paused before speaking. "Oga, that old woman is outside again." Adeyemi's pen stopped for a moment, but he did not look up. "What old woman?" "The one who sits by the gate every day. She has been there since morning again." Adeyemi sighed with annoyance. "And so? What do you want me to do?" Hakim scratched his head. "Oga, she doesn't ask for anything. All she does is look at this house like it means something to her. We have chased her many times, but she won't go." Adeyemi finally looked up, his face blank. "Ignore her as long as she doesn't cause trouble. Let her be." Hakim nodded and left, but as he stepped outside, he couldn't help but glance toward the gate. The woman was still there, still watching, still waiting. What was she waiting for? As the day passed, more people came and went in the mansion, but the old woman stayed. Night came and she was still there. Suddenly it began to rain. She finally picked up her bag and got up slowly, her joints stiff from sitting too long. With one last look at the gate, she turned and walked away into the night. But everyone knew she would be back tomorrow. She always came back. The sun rose slowly the next morning. Madame Folami, Chief Adeyemi's mother, noticed the old woman sitting outside as her driver pulled out of the mansion. She frowned. "Who is that woman?" she asked the driver. "Madam, it is one old woman who has been coming to sit here for days," the driver answered. "She does not bother anybody. All she does is look at the gate." Madame Folami's face darkened. "She has been here for years." "Yes, madam." "The guards are even tired of her." Madame Folami's hands tightened around her purse. "Make sure Chief Adeyemi never hears about her." The driver gave a strange look, but said nothing. The old woman stayed outside the gate, never giving up. She had come this far and would not stop now. No matter how long it took, she would wait because she knew one thing for sure. One day, the truth would no longer hide behind the walls of that grand mansion. The mansion was busy with movement. Cars came in and out. Drivers honked, guards guided others, maids rushed around in their neat clothes, but no one ever paid attention to the weak woman sitting just outside the gate until today. Today, the young guard walked toward her, a plastic bag in his hand. He squatted beside her and placed the bag on the ground. "Take," he said. "I bought small cakes for you." The old woman turned to him, her lips stretching into a thankful smile. "God bless you, my son." Kofi shrugged. "You can't sit here every day without food." He glanced at the mansion behind him before lowering his voice. "Mama, why are you still here? Chief Adeyemi will never notice you. Even if he does, you think he will care?" The old woman picked up the bag of cakes and took a small bite. She chewed slowly, enjoying the taste before speaking. "He will care," she said quietly. "He does not know yet, but when he finds out, he will care." Kofi sighed. "This is what you have been saying for the past 3 years, Mama. This man does not even know you exist." The old woman only smiled. Not far away, Bayo, another guard, watched him. His face was hard, his eyes narrowed. As Kofi walked back to his post, Bayo called him aside. "You better stop talking to that old woman. She is trouble." Kofi frowned. "Why would you say that? She's a harmless old woman." Bayo leaned in closer. "You don't understand. Madame Folami does not want Chief Adeyemi to hear anything about that woman. She warned us never to let her near the gate. If she catches you giving her food, you can lose your job." Kofi's eyes widened. Why would Madame Folami say Oga should not know about the woman? Bayo looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. Then he whispered, "I don't know, but I feel there is something she's hiding. Something about that woman." Kofi felt a chill run down his spine. That evening, as the sun began to set, a black SUV pulled up in front of the mansion. The gate opened and Chief Adeyemi stepped out of the house, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit. His phone was pressed to his ear and his voice was firm as he spoke. "I want that deal closed before the end of the week," he said. "No excuses." He walked down to the SUV. His mind focused on business. He didn't see the old woman. He never did. But today something was different. As the car started to pull away, the old woman stood up slowly. She watched him with eyes full of something deep. Something that had been buried for decades, and then, for the first time in 3 years, she took a step closer to the gate. The guard stiffened. Bayo moved toward her. "You can't cross here," he warned. The old woman ignored him. She raised her hand slightly, as if trying to reach out. The SUV sped past her. For a brief second, Chief Adeyemi turned his head. His eyes flickered toward the old woman outside the gate. He frowned slightly, something about her catching his eye. But then the car was gone. The old woman let her hand fall back to her side. She had waited 3 years. And now, for the first time, he had looked in her direction. It was only a second, but it was enough. For 3 years, she had been invisible to the man behind the gate. But today, even if it was just for a second, Chief Adeyemi had looked in her direction. It wasn't much, but it was a crack in the wall. She was patient. She had waited 3 years. She could wait a little longer. Inside the mansion, Chief Adeyemi sat in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His mind was busy with business matters. Yet something small kept tugging at his thoughts. That old woman. For some reason, the brief glimpse of her outside the gate stayed in his mind. There was nothing special about her. Just another beggar sitting where she had no business sitting. And yet, why did she look so familiar? With a sigh, he pushed the thought away. He had more important things to worry about. Later that evening, as Chief Adeyemi was leaving for a big business meeting, he found himself looking toward the gate again. He didn't know why. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was that strange feeling he had the night before. And then, for the second time in 3 years, his eyes met hers. She was already watching him. Chief Adeyemi's brows furrowed. Something about her gaze unsettled him. It wasn't the desperate begging look of a beggar. It was knowing, as if she knew something about him that he did not. He quickly looked away and got into his car, but as the car sped off, his fingers tapped against his knee in irritation. Why did he feel as though that old woman was waiting for him specifically? That night, for the first time in a long while, Chief Adeyemi found sleep hard to come by. Chief Adeyemi was not himself the following morning. He sat at the breakfast table, barely touching his food. His mind was restless, filled with thoughts he did not understand. That old woman, why was she always outside his gate? Why did she look at him like that? Oluwaseun, what is wrong with you? Madame Folami asked, sipping her tea. She was seated across from him, her face calm but watchful. Chief Adeyemi sighed, rubbing his temple. It is nothing, Mum. Madame Folami's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why do you look troubled? He paused before finally speaking. There is an old woman that sits outside our gate every day. I have never paid attention to her before. But recently I noticed her, and I don't know why, but something about her bothers me. A brief flash of fear showed in Madame Folami's eyes, but it disappeared quickly. Chief Adeyemi almost missed it. She placed her teacup down carefully. There are beggars everywhere, my son, she said smoothly. You shouldn't worry about such things. Chief Adeyemi leaned back in his chair. She is not like the others, Mom. She doesn't beg. She just sits there and watches. Madame Folami's fingers tightened around the edge of the table, but her voice stayed steady. She's probably crazy. Just ignore her. Chief Adeyemi studied his mother's face. He had spent his entire life learning to read people, body language, small expressions, hidden fears. It was what made him a good businessman, and right now he could tell that his mother was lying. But why? Before he could press further, the headmaid entered the dining room. Chief, your car is ready. Chief Adeyemi pushed his thoughts aside and stood up. He had a busy day ahead. But as he walked out of the house and toward his waiting car, he made a decision. Today he would take a closer look at that woman. The old woman, as always, was seated outside. Her posture calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Chief Adeyemi stepped closer, studying her. The wrinkles on her face, the graying hair, the quiet but intense look in her eyes. And then, for the first time, he spoke to her. Who are you? The air seemed to still. The old woman lifted her head, and for a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. A mix of emotions, sadness, hope, and something deeper. Chief Adeyemi couldn't take his eyes off her. I asked you a question. Who are you? The old woman opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say another word, a voice called out from behind. Oluwaseun. He turned to see Madame Folami hurrying toward him, her face carefully composed. But there was something in her eyes that showed her urgency. You are late for your meeting, she said quickly, taking his arm. Come, we must go. Chief Adeyemi hesitated, his gaze moving between his mother and the old woman. Something was wrong here, but Madame Folami's grip tightened onto his arm. Let's go, she said more firmly this time. After a long pause, he finally turned away. Without another word, he got into his car, and the gates closed behind him. The old woman sat still, watching. She had come close to him, very close, but she was patient. She had waited 3 years. She could wait a little longer. For the first time in 3 years, Chief Adeyemi had looked at her, spoken to her. She had seen the confusion in his eyes. Inside the mansion, Madame Folami paced restlessly in her bedroom. Her fingers trembled as she held a glass of water. But it wasn't thirst that made her reach for it. It was fear. For years she had kept the secret buried. For years she had controlled everything. But today it almost slipped. That woman. She had almost spoken. Madame Folami gritted her teeth. She needed to act fast. She set the glass down and picked up her phone. The call was answered after 2 rings. She is still outside, Madame Folami said, her voice sharp. I want her gone tonight. Then a low, deep voice responded, Consider it done. Madame Folami ended the call and breathed out shakily. She had done so much, given up so much to let this old woman ruin everything. No, she would not allow it. Chief Adeyemi sat in his office, tapping a pen against the glass table. His meeting had ended over an hour ago, but his mind was still busy. The old woman. Something about her bothered him. His fingers tightened around the pen. Something didn't feel right. He had spent his life making smart decisions, trusting facts, never letting feelings cloud his judgment. And yet, his gut was screaming at him that something was wrong. With a sigh, he leaned back in his chair and reached for his phone. He dialed a number. Kofi, the young guard's voice came through right away. Yes, Ogre. I want you to watch that old woman. Don't touch her. Don't send her away. Just watch her. And if anything happens to her, anything at all, I want to know right away. Yes, Ogre, Kofi answered. Chief Adeyemi ended the call and rubbed his temples. He didn't know why he was doing this, but he had learned a long time ago that when his gut told him something was wrong, it usually was. And this time, it was screaming. That night, the old woman sat in the darkness, staring at the gate, waiting. She did not know that danger was coming. She did not know that Madame Folami had made a call. She only knew one thing. She had waited for too long. And soon, the truth would finally come out. The street was quiet, except for the distant sound of passing cars. The old woman remained seated, her tired eyes fixed on the gate, waiting. Then she heard it. A footstep, soft, careful. She did not turn right away, but her heart began to beat fast. Another step. This time she turned her head slightly and saw them. Two men dressed in dark clothes, moving toward her with quiet steps. Something inside her warned her, this is not normal. She gripped the edges of her wrapper and slowly pushed herself up. Her joints hurt in protest, but she ignored them. One of the men spoke. Mama, it's late. You shouldn't be sitting out here alone. She said nothing. The other man stepped toward her. Come, let's take you somewhere safe. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. She had lived too long, seen too much. She knew the feeling of danger. And right now, it was thick in the air. She took a step back. Leave me alone. The first man sighed. Old woman, don't make this hard. They moved closer, and then a sudden voice broke the silence. Hey, what's going on there? The two men froze. The old woman turned, her eyes widening as she saw a figure coming from the shadows. Kofi, a young guard, had been watching from a distance, just as Chief Adeyemi had told him. He had seen the two men approach and sensed the trouble in the air. Now he stepped forward. I said, what is going on here? The two men exchanged a glance. Then, without a word, they turned and disappeared into the night. Kofi rushed to the old woman. Mama, are you okay? She nodded, her body still shaking. Kofi looked in the direction the men had disappeared. He knew what this was. Someone wanted this woman gone. And now he had a feeling he knew exactly who. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Ogre, it is me, he said the moment Chief Adeyemi answered. You told me to watch the old woman. I think somebody just tried to hurt her. A heavy silence. Then Chief Adeyemi's voice, sharp and cold. Bring her inside. Mama, we need to go inside now, Kofi said. The old woman hesitated. She had waited 3 years for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. Inside, she whispered. Yes, Kofi nodded firmly. Ogre said I should bring you inside. For a moment, her eyes filled with doubt. Then, with a slow breath, she gave a small nod. Kofi led her toward the tall gate. He knocked twice and the smaller entrance door opened. The other guards looked at him in confusion. Kofi ignored their questioning looks. He only had one mission, to get this old woman to safety. Inside the mansion, Chief Oluwaseun Adeyemi stood near the grand staircase. His thoughts racing, Kofi's words had sent a strange chill down his spine. I think someone just tried to kill her. Why? Why would someone want an old beggar dead? It made no sense. Unless there was something more to this woman. A sound at the door made him turn. Kofi stepped in first, guiding the old woman inside. And there she was. The woman he had only glanced at for 3 years. The woman whose presence had always been an annoyance, a mystery, an unanswered question. Now she stood in his home. For the first time, Chief Adeyemi looked at her properly. She was frail. Her hands were rough, her wrapper old and faded. But her eyes, there was something familiar about them. Something unsettling. He stepped forward slowly. Who are you? The old woman swallowed hard. Her voice came out in a whisper. I am. She stopped. Not yet, not like this. She lowered her head. I am just a poor woman. Chief Adeyemi's eyes narrowed. The old woman lifted her head again. "I have waited so long just to see you, just to speak to you." His chest tightened. Before he could respond, footsteps echoed from the staircase. Madame Folami. Her expensive gown swayed as she came down, her face a mask of surprise, but Chief Adeyemi saw something beneath it, something cold, something calculating. She stopped at the foot of the stairs and turned to Kofi. "What is she doing here?" Kofi hesitated, glancing at Chief Adeyemi. Adeyemi's voice was firm. "I asked him to bring her in." Madame Folami's fingers curled at her side, but her face remained calm. She turned to the old woman. "Mama, you should not be here. You must be tired. Let me arrange for you to be taken somewhere comfortable." The old woman looked directly at her, and something passed between them, something dangerous, something unspoken. "I am comfortable here," the old woman said quietly. Chief Adeyemi frowned. He could feel it now, the tension in the room, the way the old woman and Madame Folami looked at each other. Something was wrong, something was hidden, and for the first time in his life, he wanted to know the truth. The room was silent. Madame Folami was the first to break the silence. "This is madness." Her voice was smooth, but there was an edge of frustration in it. "Oluwaseun, you don't know this woman. She is just a beggar who has been sitting outside our gates for years. Why are you letting her into our home?" The old woman didn't flinch. Her gaze remained locked on Madame Folami. Chief Adeyemi folded his arms. "And why does that bother you so much?" Madame Folami stiffened. "Bother me?" She let out a forced laugh. "Oluwaseun, I am simply worried about you. Do you know how many dangerous people pretend to be beggars? What if she is a thief? What if she is here to cause trouble?" The old woman finally spoke, her voice steady. "I am not here to cause trouble. I only want to speak." Chief Adeyemi's eyes darkened with suspicion. "Then speak." The old woman opened her mouth, then hesitated. She glanced at Madame Folami before looking back at Chief Adeyemi. "Not here," she said softly, "not in front of her." Madame Folami's face twisted. "Excuse me? You come into my home, and now you are saying I can't be here." The old woman didn't respond. She simply waited. Chief Adeyemi studied her for a long moment. Then, without taking his eyes off her, he said, "Mum, please, leave us." A flash of panic crossed Madame Folami's face, but she quickly hid it. "Oluwaseun, you can't be serious." "I am." His voice was firm, unyielding. "Please, Mom, leave." For the first time in years, Madame Folami felt a cold dread creeping into her bones. This was bad. Very bad. She forced a smile. "All right, I will leave, but I will be close by if you need me." She turned and walked out. Inside the room, Chief Adeyemi pointed toward a chair. "Sit." The old woman obeyed. He sat across from her, studying her features, the wrinkles, the weak hands, the tired eyes, and yet something in those eyes felt strangely familiar. "Talk," he ordered. The old woman took a deep breath. "I have watched you for a long time." His fist clenched. "Who are you?" The old woman breathed out. "I am the woman who carried your truth for over 40 years. A strange coldness spread through Chief Adeyemi's chest. "My truth?" "Yes." The old woman leaned forward slightly. "The truth about who you really are." Chief Adeyemi's heart beat faster. She sighed, rubbing her hands together. "I do not know how much you are ready to hear, but you must understand. This is a story of pain, of theft, of the truth that was buried for decades." Chief Adeyemi leaned forward, his pulse pounding. "Tell me everything." The old woman breathed in deeply. Then, in a voice filled with sadness, she said, "It all began in a house not too different from this one 42 years ago. I was young when I came to work as a maid in a rich home. I had no parents, no brothers or sisters, just myself and my dreams of a better life." She paused, her eyes distant. The house belonged to a powerful man and his wife. They were rich, respected, but their marriage was troubled. The wife could not have children. The old woman continued, her voice dropping lower. She had prayed, fasted, visited doctors and even witch doctors, but nothing changed. No child came. Chief Adeyemi's throat tightened. Something inside him whispered that she wasn't just speaking of any couple, she was speaking of someone he knew. The old woman clenched her hands together. The husband of this woman was not patient. He wanted a child, and he was ready to do anything to have one. Her voice became shaky. One night he came into my room. I was only a maid, she continued. I had no power, no voice. He took what he wanted from me, and I had no choice but to bear it. There was silence, thick, heavy silence. Chief Adeyemi's hand gripped the armrest of his chair. She wasn't just telling him any story. She was telling him her story, and it was a story of betrayal and suffering. I became pregnant, the old woman whispered. I did not plan for it. I did not want it. But inside me, life was growing. The wife, my madam, found out. Chief Adeyemi's pulse quickened. She was very upset at first, but then she saw a chance. She had no child, and I had one growing inside me. So she made a decision. What decision? He asked. The old woman looked him straight in the eyes. She took my child. She waited until I gave birth, then took my baby away from me. She told the world that it was hers. She forced me out of the house and erased my existence. Her lips trembled. She had everything, wealth, power, and now my child. But I had nothing. Chief Adeyemi's heart pounded hard in his chest. A child stolen from his mother, a lie to the world. A boy raised in a mansion, believing he was born into wealth. He felt dizzy. His mind struggled to reject the thoughts forming in his head. But the pieces were clicking together so perfectly. The old woman stared at him, her eyes filled with sadness. She saw it. She saw the moment the truth hit him. Chief Adeyemi finally spoke. Who? Who was the child? The old woman breathed in sharply. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You. Chief Adeyemi's world stopped. The word echoed in his mind like a hammer striking iron. You. He could hear his own heartbeats pounding in his ears. He stared at the old woman, waiting, praying for her to take it back. But she didn't. She simply watched him, her eyes full of feelings. No, 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 Chief Adeyemi whispered, shaking his head. That's impossible. The old woman breathed out shakily. It is the truth. No. His voice was firmer now. My mother is Madame Folami. She raised me. She ... She raised you, but she did not give birth to you. I gave birth to you. Chief Adeyemi got up from his chair, his hands shaking. It felt like the ground beneath him was collapsing. You expect me to believe this? That my entire life, my childhood, my mother, that all this was a lie? The old woman swallowed. I never wanted you to find out this way. Chief Adeyemi turned back sharply. His eyes burned with anger, confusion, and something else. Fear. Who are you, and what do you want from me? The old woman's lips trembled. I am your mother, Oluwaseun. The way she said his name, his real name, sent a strange chill down his spine. I gave birth to you, she continued. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I felt your first kick. I held you when you were born. Her voice broke. And then I lost you. Chief Adeyemi clenched his fist. No, he said again, I was born into wealth. I was raised in this mansion, my father ... Your father was the one who raped me, the old woman shouted back. The words stabbed through him. He staggered back a little. She continued, he was desperate for a child. And I was an easy target. When I fell pregnant, his wife did not throw me out right away. She waited, she planned, and when I gave birth to you, she took you from me, then forced me out of the house, telling me I was nothing. Chief Adeyemi felt dizzy. Lies, lies, lies. He wanted to call her a liar. He wanted to scream, but something deep inside of him, something he didn't want to admit, believed her. Why now? He said. Why come after all these years? The old woman let out a shaky breath. I came years ago, she said softly, but I was nothing to you then. Just a beggar outside your gate, just an old woman you never noticed. A tear slid down her cheek. But I never stopped waiting, because I knew that one day you would hear me. Chief Adeyemi squeezed his eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Chief Adeyemi paced the room like a trapped animal. His heart was racing. His mind was in chaos. Everything he had known, everything he had believed, had just shattered. He turned sharply to the woman, his breath unsteady. "Do you have proof?" His voice was cold, distant, but inside he was anything but calm. The old woman met his gaze, pain flickering in her tired eyes. "I have no papers, no pictures. They erased me from your life." Chief Adeyemi clenched his fist. "Then how do I believe you?" She sighed, reaching for something inside her tattered wrapper. Slowly she pulled out a small, worn-out piece of cloth. A baby's cloth. Faded, old, but embroidered with something. Chief Adeyemi stepped closer. He squinted at the writing. Ayomide. His body stiffened. It was his name, his real name. Not the name Madame Folami had given him. Not the name he had carried for decades as the son of a millionaire. Number this was his first name. Before everything was taken, his throat tightened, his hands trembled as he reached for the cloth. But he pulled back before touching it. "No," he whispered. "This proves nothing. It's just a name. A coincidence." The old woman swallowed, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Look inside, my son. Have you never felt that something was missing? That something was wrong?" Chief Adeyemi's jaw tightened. Something inside him had always felt off. His mother, Madame Folami, had always been overprotective. Almost like she was afraid of losing him, afraid of the truth coming out. He remembered his childhood. The way she never let him get too close to anyone outside their family. The way she always panics when he asks questions about his birth. Had she been hiding something all along? He turned to the old woman. "Tell me one thing," he said. "Did you ever try to take me back?" A tear finally escaped her eyes. "I tried," she whispered. "I begged. I fought. But they had money, they had power, and I was just a poor girl, thrown away like trash." Her lips trembled. "They told me if I ever tried to claim you, they would destroy me. So I waited. I waited for you to find me." Chief Adeyemi took a deep breath. If what she was saying was true, then he was a stolen child. A lie dressed up in riches and comfort. He clenched his fist. His so-called mother, Madame Folami, owed him the truth, and he was going to get it tonight. Chief Adeyemi stood in front of his mother's bedroom door, his heart pounding. Or was she even his mother? His fist clenched at his side. He had spent his entire life loving, respecting, and protecting Madame Folami. But now, doubts crawled inside him like a disease, eating away at everything he thought he knew. Was she truly the woman who had given him life? Or was she the one who had stolen it? He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Madame Folami was seated at the edge of her large bed, draped in her silk robe. She was sipping tea, calmly as always, until she saw his face. Her hands froze around the teacup. Something in his expression made her go still. "Oluwaseun," she said carefully, "what is it?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Who am I?" She blinked. "What?" I said, "Who am I?" Madame Folami's lips parted slightly, confusion in her eyes. "Oluwaseun, what kind of question is that?" Chief Adeyemi stepped forward. "That old woman in there. She told me a story about a young maid who was raped by her boss, about a baby that was taken from her, about a rich woman who couldn't have children and needed a child to call her own." Madame Folami was silent. The silence stretched between them for a while, and then slowly she placed the cup on the bedside table. She raised her eyes to meet his, and what he saw shook him to his core. There was no surprise, no confusion, just acceptance. Chief Adeyemi's breath came out shakily. "Tell me she's lying," he whispered. "Tell me she's just some mad woman who made up these stories to get my attention." "I can't," she said. The room tilted. Chief Adeyemi stumbled back, his head spinning. He felt the walls were closing in on him, like the floor was about to swallow him whole. She wasn't lying. The old woman wasn't lying. Everything she had told him, the pain, the betrayal, the theft of his own life was true. His entire life had been a lie. "I did what I had to do," she said quietly. "What you had to do?" His voice cracked with anger. "You stole me from my mother." "She was a maid." Madame Folami snapped suddenly, her voice sharp. "She had nothing. What kind of life would she have given to you? Poverty, suffering. Is that what you wanted? Chief Adeyemi flinched. Madame Folami took a deep breath, lowering her voice. You are who you are today because of me, because of us. She clasped her hands together. Yes, I was wrong. Yes, we lied. But tell me, Oluwaseun, if you could go back, would you really choose to be the son of a poor maid over the life you have now? He stared at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. She had just admitted it, everything, and she wasn't even begging for forgiveness, she was defending it. Chief Adeyemi turned away. He needed to breathe. He needed to think, and one thing was clear. The woman who raised him, the woman he had loved and honored, was not his mother. She was his kidnapper. Chief Adeyemi stormed out of Madame Folami's bedroom. His hands were shaking. He had spent 42 years living a lie. The woman he called mother was a thief, a liar. A woman who had stolen him from his real mother and raised him as her own. He staggered down the hallway, his mind spinning. He needed air. He needed to get out of the house. As he reached the grand staircase, he heard hurried footsteps behind him. Oluwaseun, Oluwaseun, please wait. Oluwaseun, please wait. That was Madame Folami's voice. She was desperate now. He clenched his jaw and kept walking. She ran after him, grabbing his arm at the bottom of the stairs. Please, my son. He ripped his arm away from her grasp. I am not your son, he said, his voice hard. She froze, tears welled up in her eyes. I raised you, I fed you, I clothed you, I loved you. You stole me, Chief Adeyemi cut in. His voice dangerously low, his fist clenched at his side. You stole me from my real mother and erased her from my life. Madame Folami shook her head frantically. I did it to give you a better life. I did it because I loved you. Chief Adeyemi let out a bitter laugh. Loved me? He turned to her fully now, his eyes burning. If you really loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have let me decide for myself. Instead, you built my entire life on a lie. She dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she clasped her hands together. Oluwaseun, please, please don't do this. Don't throw me away. He swallowed hard. This was the woman who raised him. No matter what she had done, he couldn't erase that. But at the same time, he couldn't forget what she had done. He couldn't pretend it didn't matter. He looked down at her, his heart heavy. Then without another word, he turned and walked out of the door. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Outside, the night air was cold against his skin. But it wasn't just the cold that made him shiver. It was the weight of the truth pressing down on him. For 3 years, the old woman had waited at the gate. His real mother. His heart ached. How much had she suffered? How much had she endured? The pain, the loss, the agony of watching him grow up from afar. Knowing he didn't even know her. All those times he had dismissed her as a mad beggar. All those days he had walked past her without a second glance. All those nights she had probably cried herself to sleep, wondering if he would ever recognize her. He felt sick. Sick with regret. Sick with shame. He ran back to his home, back to where he left the old woman. And for the first time in 42 years, he wrapped his arms around the woman who had given him life. She broke down. She collapsed into his arms, crying uncontrollably. Chief Adeyemi cried too. For the first time in 42 years, she had her son in her arms. And for the first time in his life, Chief Adeyemi felt whole. The world around them became a blur. Nothing else mattered. Only these moments. Only her.
Please tell me, are you enjoying the story? If so, tell me what lessons have you actually learned? I would really love to hear your comments in the comment section down below. And remember to support this channel, please subscribe, like the video, comment, just say something, even a word could literally mean a whole lot. So I want you to tell me what lessons have you learned from this story. Trust me, these are situations that most people actually go through. I'm sure some of you that are watching this story have actually gone through this situation. So I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you dealt with the situation that you were faced with.
The mansion was quiet that morning. So quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, but makes you feel something is wrong. Mama Seun walked slowly through the long hallway. Each step echoed against walls she once scrubbed in silence, floors she once mopped with tears in her eyes and soap in her hands. But today she was not a maid. Today she was the mother of Chief Oluwaseun Adeyemi. The rich man, the son she lost and found again. She had been given a guest room to stay. Her things, just a small bag and a worn Bible, looked strange in the middle of all the luxury around her. Mama Seyun didn't complain. She had waited so long for this moment. So many lonely nights outside the gate, so many days of hunger and shame. She was inside now, but the battle had only just begun. From the stairs above, Madame Folami stood like a judge in a flowing dress, her gaze sharp. If looks could cut the skin, Mama Seyun would be bleeding. Madame Folami had raised Adeyemi, fed him, clothed him, put him through the best schools, but she hadn't given birth to him. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't erase the blood that tied mother to son. She will live in this house from now on, Chief Adeyemi had said weeks ago. Madame Folami had smiled, a cold, sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. If that is what you want, my son, but I hope she knows her place. Her place? What is the place of a mother in the house of her own child? Mama Seyun didn't need a crown. She didn't come to fight. She only wanted to know her son, to hear his laughter without hiding behind a fence or dodging guards. But Madame Folami had other plans. The war began slowly. First it was the towels. Mama Seyun would go to her bathroom and find her clean towel replaced with a rag that smelled of oil. Then it was the water. The heater in her room would mysteriously stop working. She would have to boil water in a kettle and bathe with a bucket, just like she did as a housemaid. She said nothing. When she went to the kitchen, Madame Folami would suddenly appear, her voice full of mockery. "Madam, are you sure you still remember how to cook? Or should we order a cooking app to help you? Maybe your memory is starting to fail you." The staff kept their heads down. They knew what was happening, but no one dared to speak. Madame Folami was powerful. She didn't yell, she didn't slap. But her punishment came like shadows at midnight, quiet and suffocating. One evening, Mama Seyun found her clothes soaking in bleach water in the laundry. The only wrapper she had sewn by hand, the one she planned to wear to church, was in shreds. She cried, but she didn't tell. She didn't want her son to see war where there should be peace. But not all silence is weakness, and not all wounds bleed. Chief Adeyemi noticed. He noticed that his mother's eyes had grown dimmer, that her hands shook when she reached for water, that her voice was calm and sure, now trembled when she said, "Good morning, my son." He saw her picking bits of rice from the edge of her plate one day. Her hands were shaking. He asked gently, "Mama, are you okay?" She smiled. "Old bones, my son, old bones. They get tired." But he wasn't convinced. That night he watched her from the upstairs window. She was seated outside under the mango tree in the backyard, holding her Bible and whispering a prayer. And in that moment, Chief Adeyemi realized he had brought his mother into a battlefield and the enemy wasn't outside. The enemy was the woman who raised him. The days that followed felt like a quiet scream. Mama Seyun moved through the mansion like a ghost wrapped in cloth, present yet invisible. She cleaned after herself, cooked her own meals when no one was watching, and sat alone in the garden where the birds sang more kindly than the people inside. To outsiders, it looked like peace. To Chief Adeyemi, it looked like a woman who was slowly fading away. He began to watch her closely, not with the eyes of a son, but with the instincts of a man who had been betrayed. His mother, his real mother, was changing, and not in the way old people change. She no longer looked him in the eye. Her laugh had thinned, and her cheeks had become hollow, like someone was taking her spirit away, piece by piece. He noticed the bruises on her arm one afternoon when she was serving him a plate of yam porridge. Her hand shook, and the soup nearly spilled on his white shirt. He grabbed her wrist gently. "Mama, what happened here?" She pulled away quickly. I slipped. You know these floors, they are very slippery." She forced a smile, then turned to walk away before he could ask any more. But his heart didn't rest. That night he stood in front of the window again, arms crossed over his chest, watching her sit under the garden tree, just as she always did. But this time she was weeping, no sound, just silent tears and shaking shoulders. He went back to his room with clenched fists. This was not how she was supposed to live, not after everything she had suffered. So the next morning, Chief Adeyemi made a call to his trusted tech guy. "I want eyes everywhere," he said. "I want cameras in the kitchen. Her room, the hallway, anywhere she passes regularly. No one should know, not even the staff. Yes, sir, the tech guy replied. And most especially, I want you to watch any meeting between Madame Folami and my mother. That evening, tiny cameras were installed behind flower vases, bookshelves, curtain rods, even under the kitchen cabinet. The first week, there was nothing, just Mama Sune moving slowly through the house, sometimes scrubbing her own bathroom, sometimes folding the few clothes she had. Then came the 6th night. Chief Adeyemi sat in his study, sipping wine. The house was quiet. He clicked on the video folder labeled Hallway 96. The clip opened with Mama Sune walking down the hallway toward the kitchen. She stopped to greet one of the maids, who looked too nervous to respond, and kept walking. Seconds later, Madame Folami appeared from the other end. She stepped into the hallway. Chief Adeyemi leaned forward. Madame Folami paused, then walked up to Mama Sune with a tight smile. Her voice was low but sharp. "You are still here? I thought your kind would have gone back to the gutter by now." Mama Sune said nothing. Madame Folami moved closer. "Let me make one thing clear. He may call you mother, but in this house you are still the maid. Don't you ever forget where you came from. I told his father that we should get rid of you completely. He didn't listen. But don't worry, he is no longer here with us. And if you make me angry again, you will regret ever stepping foot into this house." Then, in a blink, Madame Folami pushed her hard. Not gently, but hard enough to make the old woman stumble backward and hit her shoulder on the wall. She gasped but didn't fall. She only looked at Madame Folami with tearful, quiet eyes and turned around. Chief Adeyemi's hand dropped from his mouth. The wine glass slipped from his fingers and crashed on the floor. His heart pounded in his ears. It was real. It was happening. And she never told him. He clicked on another clip. Kitchen morning 4. There she was, pouring grain into a bowl to soak. Madame Folami walked in, pulled the bowl from her hand, and poured it down the sink. "What is this? Did you grow up in a chicken farm? How can you drink grain in my kitchen like a common rat?" "I was hungry," Mama Sune replied quietly. "Well, next time you are hungry, bark like a dog that you are. Maybe someone would throw you a bone." Chief Adeyemi covered his mouth with both hands. He couldn't take it anymore. He closed the laptop, his eyes burning, his veins tight. But still, he couldn't confront her. Why? Because he wasn't going to yell and fight. He was going to wait. He was going to catch her with his own eyes. And when that day came, not even the gates of hell would protect her. It was supposed to be a beautiful day. The sun had risen with such glory, and Mama Sune's heart was full. For the first time since she stepped into that mansion, she felt useful, seen, needed. Her son, her own son, had come to her after breakfast and gently touched her hand. "Mama, I have some foreign business partners coming for lunch this afternoon. I want you to cook for them." The way he said "Mama" made her soul tremble. It was natural, tender, real. She blinked back tears. You want me to cook?" He smiled. "Not just cook. I want them to taste real homemade food. Give them something that their expensive restaurants cannot offer." Her throat tightened. She nodded. "I will cook for you, my son. I will cook with all my heart." As he left the room, she looked up at the ceiling, her lips shaking in silent thanks. She had once cried, begging God to let her see her child again. Now she would cook for him. She tied her wrapper tightly and headed for the kitchen. That morning, she was a different woman. She soaked bitter leaf early and rinsed it clean. She fried tomatoes till the oil danced with flavor. She roasted the dry fish and pounded spices with a grinding stone. She asked the cook to bring out soup ingredients from the storage. The smell of egusi soup filled the air. It was the smell of tradition, of memories. Amara passed by the kitchen and smiled. "Mama, it smells good today, Egusito." Mama Sune laughed loudly. "Today, my daughter, today will be a day my son remembers me forever." But there was one person in the house who didn't want today to happen. She had been watching from the hallway, hiding behind pillars and corners, Madame Folami. She had heard Chief Adeyemi. She had seen the joy on his face as he asked his mother to cook. And the way that old woman's face lit up, it made something burn in her belly. That woman, that former maid, that nothing from nowhere was not only living under her roof, but cooking for her son and his international guests. No, not today. If she couldn't get her out of her house, she would destroy her name slowly, publicly, without mercy. Mama Siun had just finished the egusi soup. It was thick, rich, and golden. The smell alone could make anyone hungry. She hadn't cooked like this in years. Her back ached, but her heart danced. She stepped out briefly to get plantains from the store behind the kitchen. She was gone for just 5 minutes, but that was all it took. The kitchen door creaked open. Madame Fami stepped in, alone. She picked up the long wooden spoon and stirred the steaming soup slowly. Then she reached into her bag and brought out a tin of salt. Not a pinch, not a spoonful, the whole container. She emptied it into the soup with wicked aim, watching the salt dissolve slowly. She stirred, smiled, and adjusted her wrapper and left right away. By the time Mama Seun returned, everything looked the same. She smiled, adjusted the plate, and got the table set with help from the maid. The guests arrived at exactly 2:15 p.m. 4 men in navy blue suits, sunglasses, and expensive watches. They greeted Chief Adeyemi with laughter and firm handshakes. Deals had been signed. Now it was time to share a meal in honor of friendship. Mama cooked this herself, Chief Adeyemi announced proudly. Let this be the first taste of real Nigeria. They smiled. We have heard about African cooking. Spicy, exciting, memorable. Oh, Chief Adeyemi grinned. You are about to experience it. The maids brought in the food. Steaming bowl of egusi, golden and thick, with pounded yam. The guests clapped politely, licking their lips in hunger. Mama Seun stood at the corner, watching, her eyes full of pride. They took their first bite. Then everything went still. One of the guests coughed hard and spat the food back into his napkin. Another reached out for water, his eyes bulging. A third man gagged and pushed the plate away. What in the name of God is this? One shouted. Are you trying to kill us? It is salt, another yelled. This is a whole mine of salt. Chief Adeyemi froze. What? They all stood at once, wiping their tongues with napkins and reaching for bottled water. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I don't understand. The fourth man, an elderly investor from Portugal, Mr. Cardoso, looked straight at him. Is this some sort of insult? Before Adeyemi could respond, the man grabbed his jacket and stormed out. The rest followed. The entire room was silent. Chief Adeyemi turned to the table, stunned. Mama Seun stood frozen near the door. Her hands trembled. I don't understand, she whispered. I tasted it. It wasn't like this. From the stairs above, Madame Fami came down like a queen. Well, she said, maybe next time we will leave cooking to professionals. The words stung like acid. Mama Seun's eyes filled with tears, but she bowed her head. I am sorry. I didn't mean it. I tasted it, my son. I swear it wasn't like this. But Chief Adeyemi didn't respond. He simply stared at her, not in anger, not in judgment, in pain, because he already knew what had happened. That night, when everyone had gone to sleep, he went to his study and opened the footage, and there she was, Madame Fami, the woman who had raised him, pouring salt in the pot with no guilt. He watched her stir it slowly like a witch, and his chest tightened. Not with rage, but with grief, because the woman he once thought was his protector was nothing more than a betrayer, and the woman he had ignored for decades was the only one who had never lied to him. The next morning, the house was silent again, but this time it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence that comes before a storm. Chief Adeyemi didn't go to work. He cancelled a board meeting, turned off his phone. For the first time in a long time, business could wait. He sat alone in his study, replaying the footage over and over. Madame Fami, the woman who had held his hands during heartbreak, clapped at his graduation, fasted for him during his failed election campaign. There she was, tipping an entire tin of salt into his mother's soup, without guilt, without flinching, without shame. She looked calm in the footage, calm and planned, that cut deeper than any slap. This wasn't just mischief, it was war, and the victim was his own mother, his real mother. He couldn't shake the sound of her voice from the day before, the way it cracked, the way her body shook as she said sorry for something she didn't do. I tasted it, my son. I swear it wasn't like this. He had nodded politely then, but in his heart something had snapped. One had raised him with wealth, but hid him behind a curtain of lies. The other had carried him in her womb, nursed him with invisible hands, and waited 3 years under the sun and rain just to hear him call her mom. He felt sick, he felt betrayed, he felt angry in a way he couldn't even describe, but he couldn't rush. Not yet. He needed more than just salt in soup. He needed the world to see what he now knew. Because Madame Folami would lie. She always did, with class, with poise. She would never confess. But the walls had started watching. The cameras were now in place, silent watchers, and this time they would catch it all. For the next few days, Chief Adeyemi became a ghost in his own mansion. He didn't eat breakfast in the dining room anymore. He took his meals in the study. He didn't chat casually with Madame Folami anymore. He became formal, distant. She noticed, and it made her uneasy. One evening, as he sat in the dimly lit study reviewing security footage, she came in with a glass of orange juice. "You've been locking yourself in here, Oluwaseun. Is everything all right?" He didn't look up. "I'm fine, Mum." She smiled, placing the glass gently on the table. "You barely talk to me these days. You know you can tell me anything, don't you?" He paused, then looked at her. His eyes were unreadable, cold, suspicious. "Can I?" There was something in the way he said it. It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. "Of course, I'm your mother." The word mother hung in the air like a bad smell. He picked up the glass and held it to his nose. Then, without drinking, he set it back down. "I'll call for you when I need something." It was the first time he had dismissed her like that, not rudely, not violently, just like she didn't matter. She stood there for a few seconds, gripping the edge of the table. Then she turned and walked out, but her heart beat faster than usual. She could feel it. He knew something, and she had to find out what. That night, Chief Adeyemi watched the footage again, and this time he saw more. He saw Madame Folami mocking Mama Seun in the laundry room, throwing her wrapper on the floor and calling it rag from the gutter. He saw her whispering threats in the hallway. He even saw her pushing a tray of water to spill, just so the old woman could fall and bruise her hip. And Mama Seun, she never reacted, not once. She picked herself up, each time with dignity, wiped her tears when no one was looking, and carried on with the day. That broke him more than the abuse itself, because love had made her silent. Her love for him, she didn't want him to feel torn, didn't want to divide him between two women. But now he knew, and there was no going back. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, he entered the kitchen. The lights were low. He saw Mama Seun sitting by the window cutting vegetables. She looked up. "Ah, my son, you are not asleep." He sat beside her, not saying a word. Then he said softly, "Why didn't you tell me she was hurting you?" She stiffened. The knife in her hand paused. He turned to face her. "I've seen it, Mama. I saw the footage, all of it." Her hands trembled. Her tears came down before the words. "I didn't want you to be ashamed of her. She raised you. She gave you a name. I thought maybe she still loved you." "She doesn't," he said bitterly. "She loved ownership. That is not love. She raised me like a thing she owned. You waited in the sun for 3 years without telling anyone I belonged to you. She locked you out of my life, Mama, and I let her." Mama Seun placed her hands on his. "I forgave her a long time ago. You were all that mattered. That you are alive, that you are in good health, that you call me Mama, that is enough." But Chief Adeyemi shook his head. "No, it is not enough. You have bled too much for this family. Now it is time the truth bled too." From that day on, he began to prepare for war. Not with fists, not with knives, but with the kind of truth that no one could silence. And as Madame Folami continued her show of grace and control, she had no idea that the very walls around her were watching. Mama Seun carried her wounds in silence. She had survived betrayal before. She had survived being thrown out like a stray dog after giving birth to the child of her boss. She had survived 3 decades of loneliness, watching from afar as her son grew into a powerful man with no memory of her face, nor knowledge of her pain. She had survived the streets. She had survived hunger. She had survived shame. But what she did not expect to survive was being hated inside her own son's home. Not by strangers, not by outsiders, but by the very woman who had taken everything from her and still wanted more. Every day in the mansion became a lesson on endurance. Madame Folami never hit her when anyone was watching. No, she was smarter than that. Her weapons were words full of poison, acts of meanness disguised as accidents, and mind games that tried to crush the little dignity Mama Sion had left. The cook would serve everyone full plates of steaming rice and chicken. But Mama Sion's food would come late, cold and dry. "Sorry, we forgot," the cook would say, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. She never forgot. But she had children of her own, bills, rent to pay. She had seen what Madame Folami could do to people's jobs. Sometimes Mama Sion would sweep her own room and find pieces of broken glass under the bed. Once she caught a rat in her bathwater, placed there on purpose. And every day her body grew thinner, weaker, her steps slower. Still she said or did nothing. Why? Because her silence had a reason. It was not fear, it was love. One morning she woke up with a swollen ankle. She had tripped over something in the hallway the night before. A stool that had been placed there when she last walked past. She didn't cry. She limped to the bathroom, wrapped her foot with a scarf, and wore a smile by the time she stepped out for morning prayers. Chief Adeyemi noticed the limp. He noticed everything now. As they sat in the parlor with open Bibles, his eyes never left her face. She winced each time she stood. But when he asked, she waved him off. "Ah, it is a small pain. I twisted my leg. It will go." He didn't argue, but inside him something boiled. Later that evening, as he sat reviewing the footage, he saw it all. The stool, the careful placement, and then Madame Folami stepping out of her room moments later, wearing a robe, sipping tea and smirking as she looked down the hallway. He covered his mouth with his hands. He couldn't understand it. Why? Why so much hatred? Hadn't she won already? She had taken him from his own mother. She had raised him, giving him power, wealth, respect. Why was she trying to destroy the woman who had already lost everything? He stormed out of the study and went to Mama Seon's room. She was on the floor, kneeling on a small rug, praying. Her voice was soft, yet strong. "And Lord, I forgive her again tonight. Help me not to hate her. Help me not to see her the way she sees me. She is still someone's daughter." Chief Adeyemi froze. His chest caved in. His mother, his real mother, was on her knees, not asking for justice, not asking God to expose Madame Folami. She was praying for her. She was blessing the woman who had made her life a prison. "Mama," he said. She looked up, startled. "My son, you are still awake." "I heard you praying," he said. "For her." She smiled gently. "Yes, I do that every night." "Why?" His voice cracked. "Why would you pray for someone who hates you so much?" Mama Sion leaned back and sat on the edge of the bed. "Because if I don't pray for her, I will become like her. I spent so many years waiting outside this gate, watching her walk past me like I was trash. Watching you drive past me without even looking. My heart turned bitter many times. But bitterness is a chain, my son. It doesn't bind your enemies, it binds you. She took you from me, yes, but I still found you. That is a miracle I cannot take for granted." "But Mama," he whispered, "you are suffering." She nodded. "Yes, it is better to suffer in truth than to flourish in lies." He knelt before her, resting his head on her lap like a little boy. His voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Mama." She stroked his hair softly. "You have nothing to be sorry about. You didn't know." The next day, Mama Sion woke up to more trouble. Her clothes had been cut, neatly sliced with scissors. Every wrapper, every blouse, her entire bag was empty, left open like a corpse after surgery. Still, she didn't complain. Chief Adeyemi sat in his study, shivering, not because the air conditioners were on full blast, but because of the silent storm in the house. In the middle of that, he stood torn between two women, the one who raised him and the one who birthed him. For days he walked through the house in silence. He barely spoke, barely ate. He didn't even attend meetings. He stopped answering his business line. His staff whispered in corners. His house felt like a courtroom. His eyes were different now, always watching, always thinking. It was a Tuesday afternoon when he finally asked Madame Folami to join him in the study. She came in gracefully as always. "Sit," he said. She raised a brow at his tone, but said nothing. She sat. He closed the folder he was reviewing and finally looked at her. "I need to ask you a question," he said, "and I want you to answer me with the truth. Just once. As my mother." She smiled tightly. "Of course, I have nothing to hide." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Do you hate her?" She blinked. "Who?" "You know who." He paused. "She does not belong here." "That is not what I asked you." Madame Folami's jaw tightened. "She is not my concern. She is a woman from the streets." "You have given her too many bruises." Her lips parted slightly. He stood up and walked to the window. "I have seen the cameras, Mom." She froze. "I have seen everything. She is starving in this house. She is afraid to eat. She is limping. She is losing weight. You poured water on her mattress. You cut up her clothes. You even humiliated her in the kitchen. You tried to poison her name in front of my guests. You tripped her. You mocked her." Still, she said nothing. Then he turned to face her, his voice trembling with quiet fury. "And worst of all, you act like you have done nothing wrong." Madame Folami's eyes finally met his. "She took you from me." "She gave birth to me, Ma," he shouted. "You took me from her," he continued. "She carried me, bled for me. She loved me when I was just a cry in her arms. And you took that child and built a lie." Madame Folami stood. She was a maid, a nothing. Do you know what kind of life she would have given you? Mud huts and hunger. You would have grown up as a roadside mechanic or even a bus conductor. I gave you this life. He stepped closer. "You gave me chains wrapped in gold." Her voice cracked. "I gave you love." He roared. "You gave me a lie." His voice echoed through the walls. Somewhere in the house, a maid who was listening dropped a plate. Madame Folami's eyes glistened with tears, not from guilt, but rage. "I fed you with my hands," she whispered. "I sang for you at night. I buried your father alone and raised you with everything I had. And now you call me a liar." "You are a liar." Her face fell. His next words came slowly, deliberately. "I looked up to you. You were my world. You were the woman I prayed for on Mother's Day. You were the reason I started my first company. I used to say, 'My mother is my hero.'" Tears streamed down his face. "But you were hiding a stolen crown. You let the real queen beg outside our gate for 3 years." Madame Folami walked towards him, her voice trembling. "You think she loves you more than I do? She never lied to me. She never raised you either because you pushed her away." They were both shouting now, shaking, weeping. And then, just like that, it broke. Madame Folami fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean to become this person," she said, "but I was desperate. I was barren. I watched woman after woman have babies while I slept with rags stuffed in my stomach to pretend I was pregnant. Your father was going to leave me. He already had side chicks lined up. I just needed something that was mine. And so you stole a baby, right? I raised you better than she could ever have. But I wasn't yours to raise." She looked up at him, her face flushed with tears. "I loved you like my own, Oluwaseun." His jaw clenched. "You don't destroy what you love." Later that night, he sat alone in his bedroom. He stared at a picture on his bedside table, a younger version of himself and Madame Folami, both smiling on the day of his university graduation. She looked proud. He looked happy. But now he wondered how much of that life was real. His door creaked. It was Mama Seun holding a cup of warm ginger tea. "I heard you shouting earlier," she said softly. He nodded, his eyes heavy with grief. "She told me everything." Mama Seun sat beside him. "You know, when you were taken from me, I prayed every day that the woman raising you would be kind, that she would hold you close, teach you well, give you what I could not." "I thought she did," he said. "She tried her best," Mama Seun whispered, "but pain turns some people kind and others cruel." He looked at her. "How are you still so gentle?" "After everything," she smiled, "because if I let anger win, I'll lose you again." That broke him. He fell into her arms, sobbing. "I don't know who I am anymore, Mama. I don't know which mother to love. I am lost." She held him close. "You are not lost, my son. You are just waking up. And waking up hurts." The morning began quietly. Mama Seun rose early as usual. She had learned not to sleep so deeply in this house, not with Madame Folami's footsteps always lurking around the corner like a shadow that refused to leave. She went about her duties like a servant, even though she was the matriarch of the house. She arranged her son's shirt, swept her own room, and made her own tea. The mansion had 10 staff members, but she never asked anyone for help. She didn't want to provoke Madame Folami more than she already had. But even her silence was an offense. Even her kindness, her patience, her gentleness, it irritated the woman who had stolen everything from her. Because no matter what Madame Folami did, she could not erase the truth. She was not Adeyemi's mother. Later that afternoon, Chief Adeyemi informed both women that he had another set of visitors coming over the following day, African business leaders from Ghana and South Africa. They were coming to discuss a potential joint venture, and he wanted his mother to cook again, his real mother. There was no request in his voice. It was a statement. "I want Mama Seun to prepare lunch," he said. He was standing between both women at the dining table. His tone was firm. His eyes darted between them, daring anyone to challenge him. Mama Seun nodded gently. "I will do it, my son." Madame Folami's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Not then. But inside something snapped. That evening, Madame Folami walked into the kitchen. The staff disappeared quickly, sensing the tension. Her eyes scanned the pot Mama Seun had set aside. She said nothing at first. Then she walked slowly towards the shelf where the salt was kept. But this time she didn't reach for anything. She turned around and stared at Mama Seun. "You think because he lets you cook, he loves you?" Mama Seun paused, a wooden spoon in her hand. "I don't think," she said calmly. "I know." Madame Folami scoffed. "What you know doesn't matter. What you remember doesn't matter. You are a woman from the streets who forced her way into a story that doesn't belong to her." "I didn't ask for a story," Mama Seun replied. "I only came for my son." "What son? You came to destroy everything I had built." "No, I came to restore what you stole." There was silence. And then, Madame Folami snapped. She rushed towards the old woman, her eyes wild. "You dirty, crawling animal," she screamed. "You want to take him from me, over my dead body." She shoved the tray of ingredients off the counter. Tomatoes, pepper, onion, all went crashing to the floor. "Madam, please," Mama Seun cried out. "Don't do this. He's watching. He knows the truth." Madame Folami laughed bitterly. "Let him watch. Let him see what happens when filth tries to sit on the throne." Then she raised her hand and slapped Mama Seun, a hot, burning slap that sounded like thunder. Mama Seun staggered backwards, eyes wide, breath stolen from her lungs. "You want to take my place?" Madame Folami shouted. "You think this is your home? You think you can just walk around here like you belong?" Tears welled in Mama Seun's eyes, not from pain, but from the heartbreak. She had taken enough, but now her spirit had crashed. She stared Madame Folami in the face. "Only my son can send me away," she said, her voice trembling. "Not you. Never you." Those words broke something in Madame Folami. She lunged forward and shoved her again, but this time they were standing at the top of the stairs, and the push was too strong. Mama Seun lost her balance. Her legs gave way, her body tipped backward, and she stumbled down the stairs, slowly, painfully, each step knocking against her bone and skin until she hit the last one and rolled onto the cold marble floor below. She didn't move. Blood trickled from her forehead, and the house went dead quiet. At the top of the stairs, Madame Folami stood frozen. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her hands trembled. Her eyes widened at the sight below. She hadn't meant to push that hard, or maybe she had. She didn't know anymore. She was just standing there, still processing what she had done, when a door opened from the right corridor. Chief Adeyemi stepped out. He had been in his study, and he had seen it all, every second of it. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He ran down the stairs, dropped to his knees beside his mother, and screamed her name. "Mama! Mama!" She didn't respond. His hands shook as he touched her neck. He felt a pulse, faint but present. He took out his phone and called the paramedics. Then he turned his head slowly and looked up. Madame Folami was still standing there, frozen like a statue. "You pushed her," he whispered. She opened her mouth to speak. She insulted me. "I saw it," he said. "Everything. I saw everything, from the moment you walked into the kitchen to when she rolled down the stairs." He stood up and walked up to her and looked her straight in the eye. "If anything happens to my mother, I will kill you with my bare hands." She gasped, stepping back, her hands trembling. "She's manipulating you. She's turning you against me." Then the front door burst open. 2 policemen entered. "I called them," Adeyemi said. "We are going to answer for everything." The ambulance came. Mama Seun was rushed to the hospital. Chief Adeyemi sat beside her the entire way, holding her hand and praying under his breath. "Please, Mama, don't leave me. Not now." The courthouse was packed, even before the proceedings began. A silent tension hung over the room. Spectators filled the gallery, lawyers in black robes, journalists with cameras, staff whispering into each other's ears. This wasn't just any trial, this was the scandal of the decade. Madame Folami, socialite, philanthropist, former chairlady of the Lagos Women's Council, was standing trial for attempted murder, abuse, negligence, and domestic cruelty. Her victim, the old woman everyone used to call beggar at the gates, now revealed to be the biological mother of Chief Oluwaseun Adeyemi, the billionaire, the Lion of Lagos, and he was seated in the front row beside his real mother. The judge entered and everyone rose. The case was called. The charges were read. "How do you plead?" the judge asked. "Not guilty," Madame Folami replied. A quiet gasp rippled through the courtroom. Adeyemi closed his eyes. She was going to fight? Even after everything? The prosecution began. They presented the surveillance footage. Clips of Madame Folami slapping Mama Seun, shoving her, insulting her. The video of her dumping salt into the soup. The video of her pushing a stool in the hallway, then watching as Mama Seun tripped and limped away. And finally the footage from the day of the fall. The push, the stairs, the blood. Gasps filled the room. Some people covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Mama Seun lowered her head, her fingers gripping her wrapper. But Madame Folami, she stared at the screen, jaw tight, emotionless. When she was asked if she had anything to say, she stood up and spoke confidently. "That woman is manipulative. She came into my house to tear my family apart. I did everything I did out of love for my son." "Love?" the judge asked. "Is that what you call throwing someone down the stairs?" "She provoked me," Madame Folami snapped. "She told me she was going to take away my son from me. I was emotional. I wasn't thinking." The judge raised a brow. "You weren't thinking when you poured salt into a soup, when you cut up her clothes, when you tripped her." The courtroom fell silent again. Then it was Mama Seun's turn. She was asked to describe her experience living under Madame Folami's roof. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She simply said, "I came to see my son. I came to be his mother. But instead I became a prisoner in a house where I was once a maid. I was insulted, starved, humiliated, pushed, bruised. But I stayed because I love my son more than I love my pride." The judge's eyes softened. "And if given the chance," the lawyer asked, "would you press charges again?" "No, I will not," Mama Seun said quietly. "Not because she doesn't deserve punishment, but because I have already lost too many years. I don't want to lose any more in courtrooms and police stations. I just want peace. But the law must take its course." After a 2-week trial, the judge returned and the verdict was read. On the count of attempted murder, guilty. On the count of abuse, guilty. On all charges, this court finds the defendant guilty. Madame Folami turned to look at Chief Adeyemi one last time. Her eyes pleaded, but his were filled with tears, not of joy, of grief. He had loved her once, truly. And now he was burying that love with a guilty verdict. As she was led away in handcuffs, she screamed, "I raised you. I gave you everything. You were mine. Mine." But Chief Adeyemi didn't move. He held Mama Seun's hand, helping her up. They walked out of the courtroom slowly. Together and behind them, the doors closed on the woman who had once owned the mansion, the crown, the power, and the lies. Now all she had was silence and a life sentence. For the first time in decades, Mama Seun slept through the night without fear. No more whispers at the door, no more footsteps outside her room, no more shadows behind her curtains. Just peace. a long overdue piece. A few weeks later, Chief Adeyemi handed his mother a wrapped box. She opened it slowly and gasped. Inside were 2 new wrappers, gold and purple, with intricate embroidery and a brand new designer handbag. "Mama," he said, "you are not a maid anymore. You are my mother, and I want the world to see it." Her eyes watered. "I have wrappers, my son. I have clothes." "No," he said, "you had rags. Now you will wear honor." She cried that night, tears of joy, tears of release, tears that washed away 40 years of pain. He didn't stop there. A few days later, he invited his close friends and family for a private dinner. He stood at the head of the table and raised a glass. "Most of you know her as the woman at the gate, but tonight I want to introduce her properly." He turned to her, smiling proudly. "This is Mama Siyun, my mother, my first home, my miracle." She covered her face, overwhelmed. Guests clapped. Tears flowed. The staff watched in awe. The woman they used to ignore, the woman they used to pity, was now the matriarch of the mansion, and she wore it with grace. One fateful day, Chief Adeyemi stood beside her and said, "Mama, what do you think about starting something? A place for widows, for women like you, who were forgotten, who were lied to, who are still waiting." She turned slowly to look at him. "You want me to help them? I want you to lead them." Her eyes filled with wonder. "I have never led anything before in my life." "Mama, you led your pain with dignity," he said. "Now it is time to lead others into healing." And so, Mama Sun Foundation was born, a place where broken women found shelter, where abandoned mothers found their voice, where rejected souls were reminded that they still mattered. She became more than a mother. She became a matriarch to many. And just like that, a maid became a mother, a son reclaimed his blood, a lie died, and love lived forever. If you enjoyed this story, I'm certain you'll enjoy the next one showing on your screen right now. Please click on the thumbnail to watch the next story. I'd appreciate your support. Like this video, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to my channel. See you in my next story. Bye.